Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new year of the Children's Nebraska School Health Learning Collaborative. I'm Andrea Riley, and I am the state school nurse consultant and work as a school health liaison for Children's. And I'm so glad today to be introducing you to a wonderful speaker from Children's, David Husky. He is the husband of Jill Husky, a trauma data registrar at Children's, the father of 4 adult children and 8 grandchildren. He was a chaplain at Children's Hospital since 2016. And David now serves as the Thrive program manager. And together with Howie, who is our chief morale officer, hopefully you have some pictures to show of Howie. That's a golden retriever. They focus on providing confidential, evidence-based interventions that support the emotional well-being and mental health of our workforce. Thrive currently has 122 trained peer supporters, and since 2021 has facilitated 130 reflective round sessions with over 1,200 team members participating. The vision of Thrive is to create a culture where emotional well-being is prioritized and addressed in a way that is free of shame, embarrassment, or fear of retribution. These efforts, in combination with other well-being initiatives, have contributed to an employee engagement rate that is 16% above the national benchmark for Children's Hospital, an increase in overall retention, and an RN retention rate of 90%. He is our internal expert on employee health, and that is a topic we really wanted to cover today. So without further ado, he's going to be talking about breaking up with burnout and what we can all do in our work lives for stress management.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and good afternoon, everybody. Let me do my screen share here. Okay. Is that working for everybody? Good. Okay. We do a quarterly well-being magazine here at Children's, and our most recent issue that we launched a couple of weeks ago is on the theme of burnout. So I stole our cover art for that edition of the magazine for our session here today. But I want to thank everybody for your time. Real quickly here, just from our disclosures slide, that there are no conflicts of interest to disclose. Here's where I want us to go over the next hour. I want to talk about part one, understanding burnout. We're going to define it and describe it and see if we can get a better handle on what it really looks like and what it is. Then we're going to move to part two, building resiliency through healthy boundaries and what I call self-reflection. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for some questions and answers and interaction. So let's start with a definition. This definition comes from the World Health Organization on their International Classification of Diseases. And they define burnout as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And it has 3 dimensions. The first dimension is that those feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. This is the kind of tiredness. This is mental tiredness and physical tiredness that you don't recover from by sleeping in on a Saturday or Sunday morning. This is a tired level of exhaustion and depletion that carries with you. The second second dimension is that increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism about one's job. So this is that emotional withdrawal. You withdraw emotionally and mentally from your work. And as what happens is that our cynicism goes up and our engagement goes down with work. And then it culminates in ultimately this sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. My hope is this early in the school year, no one is yet experiencing the full symptoms of burnout. I hope everybody is energized and passionate about the start of the school year, but I think it's a good time to talk about it because in the middle of it, we lose our sense of perspective. Our friends and family often notice it way before we do when we're in the throes of burnout. But what happens is in response to our exhaustion and energy depletion, think of every day, think of your energy for today as a fuel gauge on a vehicle. Your tank might be full. You might be at 70%. You might be at half a tank. Some of you, might be the red light might be on and, you're bordering on empty. But wherever your tank, whatever your energy level is today, in response to that exhaustion, we have to make really hard choices about how we invest the energy we do have. And let's say I'm only at 70% today, so I don't have a lot of hard choices, but I may have some difficult choices to make about how I spend the energy I do have. If I had 100% energy, I would do A, B, C, D, and E, but I don't have 100% today. So I have to start making some difficult choices about how to invest that energy. So I start withdrawing, distancing myself relationally, emotionally, and there's those initial steps then of disengagement because I just don't have it in me today. So our cynicism goes up and our engagement level goes down. Now I want to talk kind of about just really that understanding of burnout. And we're going to talk about three different stages of burnout here in a moment. But I don't know if you're familiar with the cliche, find a job you'll love and you'll never work a day in your life. I personally, that statement may resonate with you, but I've never found it to be all that helpful. When we equate work we love with not really working, it propagates this belief that if we love it so much, why shouldn't we do more of it? After all, who needs a day off when you're not really working to begin with? If you love your job that much, then just work at it even more. If I had to label my relationship status with my work, I think I would choose it's complicated. My work is rewarding, my work is engaging, but it can also be exhausting and overwhelming, and sometimes I just need a break from it. And what I think this statement gets to is that idea of passion. If you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, passion is that emotional fuel that motivates us and energizes us towards a goal or an objective. Think of the tunnel walk ritual at Memorial Stadium before a Husker football game when a sea of red, 85,000 people strong, welcomes their team onto the field and wills them to victory. That's passion. I love passion. It brings color and animation to our lives, but it must be tempered and managed by healthy boundaries, which is what we'll get to in part two. When passion is unrestrained, passion burns so intensely and can burn too intensely and result in all sorts of negative consequences, including burnout. But you see, the seeds of passion and the seeds of burnout both stem from the same source. I'm willing to bet you've never met an apathetic person struggling with burnout. They don't care enough to be burned out. They're not invested enough to be burned out. It's people who have passion for their job and their work that are most susceptible to burnout. And I hope you love your work, but please don't make work the only thing that you love. And we'll talk a little bit more about how, that sense of perspective and diversity, and how do we approach work in a healthy way and keep some of those healthy boundaries with work. So about the three stages of burnout. And these stages are taken from Wick's book called Bounce, Living a Resilient Life. And he describes three levels. Level one, he calls the daily burnout. And daily burnout is being mentally fatigued at the end of a day, feeling unappreciated, frustrated, bored, tense, or angry. May have physical symptoms such as a headache, backache, upset stomach. Activities and requirements of your work uh, seem greater than the personal or professional resources available. And that's one I really, really worry about for educators. When the requirements of your work are greater than the personal or professional resources that are available to you. When the tasks of the job are repetitious beyond your ability or require an intensity that can on a continuous basis. There's no break in the intensity. You move from one intense situation to another intense situation day in, day out. But please don't panic if you come home once or twice a week with a headache and say, today was a really hard day. You are not in the throes of burnout. There will be days like this. There will be days where what's called from us is more than what we have in our tank. But at this stage, what we want to pay attention to is the frequency of days or the accumulation of multiple days in a row where you feel like this. If you feel like this at the end of the day on Friday, at the end of a week, it probably meant you had a pretty good week and invested. You gave all you had that week, and now you're entering the weekend and it's time to recover. But again, but pay attention to the frequency of days. But start with a recognition of what daily burnout might look like. Let's talk about level two. Level two is that transition when workplace stress moves into the arena of distress. Level two is where you should start becoming concerned. Your idealism and enthusiasm wane, and your disillusionments begin surfacing on a regular or consistent basis. You experience a general loss of interest in yourself for a period of a month or longer. Pervasive feelings of boredom, stagnation, apathy, frustration, viewing coworkers and students impersonally and without thought. An inability to be refreshed by other elements in one's life, such as a good book or a movie or whatever your hobbies and interests might be. Those things don't refresh you in the way they used to. A loss of interest in professional resources, books, conferences, webinars, and then periods lasting a week or more of irritation, depression, or anxiety that do not seem to lift, even with some efforts to correct the apparent causes. And again, this is the point where you should start becoming concerned. And the key differentiator is when days like this, the daily stresses, when days like this move from occasional to frequent, when half or more of your days are described as hard days, and you start getting beyond that 50% mark and the scale starts to tip, and now suddenly there are more days like this that are extra days and hard days and stressful days. When those things build up, that's when we're at risk for moving from stress to distress. And when this talks about lack of interest in self, this might be neglecting a workout, ignoring, my goal is to drink so many ounces of water every day. And suddenly you kind of give up and you stop paying attention to your daily water intake. Not engaging in important relationships. A best friend calls and you just don't have it in you to call them back. So you ignore the call or ignore the text. But those things that bring you joy, you start losing interest in those things again, on a consistent basis. Things that I used to care about don't excite me anymore. And those could be work things or personal things in both arenas. Those things can manifest themselves as a indicator of burnout. And then ultimately we have level 3. When distress becomes chronic and a physical illness has developed. And you'll see again, now the enthusiasm is gone and the disillusionment is what's constant. An overall loss of interest in yourself. Dominant feelings of boredom, stagnation, apathy, and frustration. You now view coworkers and your customers or students impersonally and without thought. There is no more joy or refreshment in the favorite things of your life. Long periods of irritation, depression, or stress that don't seem to lift, even with, again, the efforts to correct them. And then you have this physical pain or illness that has no obvious explanation or is disproportionate to the explanation. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book a few years ago called The Body Keeps the Score. And the idea is unprocessed trauma and distress will always find a way to manifest itself. That your body keeps the score. I remember during COVID, I experienced a season of major significant burnout. I never lost my love for the work I do. I just had nothing left to give, but kept on giving. And during that time, I developed a chronic right hip pain. It led to I had total hip replacement in 2023. Now, the thing is, the imaging revealed arthritis in my hip and my right hip, but I also have the same level of arthritis in my left hip and the same level of arthritis in my low back. But I didn't have any pain in my low back. I didn't have any pain in my left hip. I had significant pain in my right hip, and there was no real explanation, for why this chronic pain in the right hip. And I think it's attributed to that season of burnout and not having good boundaries and ignoring and not processing some of the things that I needed to process. And I think it's important to hear burnout can be helped, but burnout is not resolved by a change of job or career. Burnout is resolved by a change in self. You can change jobs and find some temporary relief. You can change careers and find some temporary relief. But I think the real work in overcoming burnout comes from self, not circumstances. That if we fail to deal with the things that led to the burnout in the previous job, those things will continue to follow us into the next job or the next career until we do the self work that needs to be done. So just part 1 here, kind of in summary, we talk about burnout results from chronic workplace stress that's not been successfully managed, and it has 3 dimensions. People who are passionate about their work are more susceptible to burnout. And then there are 3 progressive stages to burnout. And let's move then. How we do it? Let me check how we're doing on time. Move to part 2, where we're talking about building resiliency through healthy boundaries and self-reflection. So when we talk about healthy boundaries, I want to start with this idea of empathy and how we understand empathy. I work in healthcare, and I think even inside healthcare, outside healthcare, really the dominant understanding of empathy is generally the layman's definition is going to be empathy is to feel what other people feel. And that definition has led some people, at least in healthcare, to say healthcare has no role in the practice of medicine. Uh, because of this definition that empathy requires me to feel what other people feel. In the introduction, you heard I spent about 7 years here as the chaplain in the pediatric intensive care unit. Let's say we'd have 25, 30 patients and families in our unit on a daily basis. If I felt what every patient, if I tried to feel what every patient and family on that unit was feeling, it would crush me. And I have pretty broad shoulders, but we just can't bear the weight of that kind of burden of what you encounter in education, in public school education, in healthcare, in some of those arenas. For me, empathy is much more about perspective taking, and it's rooted in curiosity. Empathy, I may feel for the other person, but empathy is more, is you seek to understand how an event or experience impacts another person and then respond in a way that builds trust and rapport. What does this situation mean to you? How is this situation impacting you? What does it look like in this area of life? How is it affecting you in that area of life? It's a curiosity-based caring that you want to know more because you genuinely care. How is this affecting that person? But it doesn't require you to feel at the same level that person is feeling. And so while empathy can be a major contributor to burnout, I think it's a misunderstanding of what empathy really is that leads to burnout. I believe a proper understanding of empathy can help combat burnout rather than being a leading cause of burnout. And one of the ways to practice empathy, good empathy and a proper understanding of empathy is through healthy boundaries. We could spend all day making a list of good boundaries, but here are a few just to kind of bring to our attention. Uh, First of all, know your role. So ask yourself, what is my job, and how can I focus on doing just my job to the best of my ability? Whatever your role is, take pride in doing your role in an efficient and timely manner and with compassion, but your focus is on your job, not everybody else's job and all of the things outside your scope, which leads to the second boundary. So when we know our role, knowing our role helps us stay in our lane. Don't assume responsibilities for things outside your scope. Now, we all know people who overfunction, right? Or try to overfunction. We all know people who try and fix or control everything in their life. Whatever situation they encounter, they try and fix it. They make it their responsibility. They take ownership for something that isn't even their responsibility. We don't like people like that, do we? And we get kind of irritated by people who tend to overfunction and step outside of their roles and assume responsibility for other things. So a good, healthy boundary to combat burnout, knowing our job, staying in our lane, and make referrals. If a student goes to a nurse to complain about a headache, And as a nurse, you realize that the cause of this headache is stress at home. Maybe mom and dad are going through a divorce. Okay. Treat the headache, but refer that student to a school counselor or social worker. Uh, you do your job, let other people do, and then refer to other people to let other people do your job instead of assuming responsibility for every aspect of this student's life. And what's going on at home and what's going on with mom and dad and where's he staying on the weekends and he's getting shipped back and forth. But as a school nurse, your responsibility, he comes with a headache. I'm going to treat the headache, compassionately treat him with the headache, and make referrals to get him or her the level of support he needs to help him deal with the root causes of what's causing the headache. And then ultimately, this idea of embrace limits. This one's probably the hardest one for me. I don't like admitting that I have limits, but we can't do it all. We can't do it all. So don't put pressure on yourself to do more than you are called to do. Some systems and processes aren't going to get fixed today. Doesn't mean we don't continue to advocate for system improvement. It doesn't mean we quit fighting for better processes. But there are times we have to embrace our limits. I'm going to do what I can do to the best of my ability. And I'm not going to bear the weight of the world for every other system and every other process that might be working or might be failing that student. And then trust your teammates. When it's time for you to walk away at the end of the day, do just that. And trust that others will provide the same level of compassionate support and care that you did. If you make a referral to a counselor or a social worker, trust that counselor or social worker is going to do a great job. They're going to care about that student as much as you care about that student. And they're going to get them a great level of support and the best level of care possible. And you don't have to go home bearing the weight of the responsibility or the burden of worrying about that kid because you referred them to a teammate who you trust that will do everything in their power to get the resources that student needs. Boy, I could spend all day talking about healthy boundaries, and maybe when we get to the questions and answers, we can have more of a conversation, and you can add some of your own boundaries. But I want to move to this idea of self-reflection. So how do we build resiliency? A lot of ways we build resiliency. One of the ways to do it is having good, healthy boundaries and sticking to those boundaries. And by the way, when I talk about sticking to the boundaries, I'm talking about the general pattern of your work habits and work life. I'm not talking about those rare occasions where it's all hands on deck and everybody needs to pitch in to get through a situation. We all have those moments. We all break our boundaries for the good of the team when it's one of those, again, all hands on deck. Everybody needs to pitch in a little extra and we give a little extra. I'm talking about poor boundaries being that chronic day in, day out, over functioning, assuming responsibility for things that isn't ours, trying to fix and control every problem that comes across our desk. So good boundaries helps build resiliency to combat burnout, but so does this idea of self-reflection. I'm going to play a short little video here by Simon Sinek, and then I'm going to present to you a model on how you can practice this idea and concept of self-reflection. But I'm going to let Simon Sinek describe the value of it first.
Costs are rising and families.
No, please apologize for a little commercial here. This is not an endorsement. This is there we go.
Reflection playing in shaping your personal growth. The ability to look at oneself critically, to say to oneself, you were good in that situation, you weren't good in that situation, you could have been better in that situation. Not to be overly critical, meaning you're always at fault if something goes badly, or not to be so filled with hubris that you think everything you did was fine and it's always the other person, but be able to sort of separate yourself, to look at the situation from as if you were the third party, evaluating it. You know, when they do sales training, there's, you know, it's always three people. One who pretends to be the salesman, one who pretends to be the customer, and one who observes. And then they will take turns, you know, and the one who does the learning is the observer. So the question is, can you be your own observer? Like, can you replay a situation? And so self-reflection has been huge for me, and I've been huge into it for many, many, many years. The ability to say, okay, I can take some responsibility for the outcome of that, good or bad, and I can learn to do that again, or I can learn to spot those situations and avoid them in the future.
So think of self-reflection as becoming an observer of your own life. And when you have one of those days, maybe there was, you know, something significant happened at school today. It was an encounter with a teacher. It was an encounter with another colleague. It was a run-in with a principal. It was a parent who called me on the phone and said this to me. It was an interaction with a student, but something in that day that just kind of sticks with you, that bugs you. Self-reflection is a great way to become an observer, to step outside the emotion of it all and genuinely reflect on what that event was. So here's a self-reflection. I call this the action reflection integration model. But it really starts with, so let's say you do this on the drive home. You had that significant event that happened today. Instead of ignoring it, instead of burying it and stuffing it down and pretending it didn't happen, what might be different if on the drive home, you took 10 or 15 minutes and walked through this process and you asked yourself, as the observer, stepping aside for a moment, what happened today? I had a rude parent call me on the phone and they were very demanding, and I didn't respond to them in the way I wanted to, and it escalated and it just got kind of nasty, whatever that thing might be. But what happened? What did I think about that event? What were you telling yourself? What story were you telling yourself in your head in the moment? What did I feel in that moment? And it may be devalued. It may be humiliated. It may be taken advantage of, whatever that thing might be. And then, so what did I think about the event? What did I feel about the event? And be really honest about what those emotional responses were, without judgment, without shame. And then ask yourself, how did I act? And like Simon Sinek said in the video, I handled that situation really well. I didn't handle that situation quite so well. But again, through reflection, just be really honest. How did I act? And in your action, was I consistent with my values? Was I true to myself? What would I do different? And what would I do next? And it may be I need to call that parent back and apologize to them for my part, the way what I contributed to the conversation. I need to go have a conversation with my principal, my administrator about that interaction I had with them today. I need to go back to that student and say, hey, you know what? I wasn't at my best yesterday when you needed something from me and I was short with you. But again, you have the action and you actually take the time to reflect upon it. And then you integrate back into your life those lessons that you learned. But the key to all of this is the ability to do it with self-compassion. This is not a beat yourself up exercise. This is not a time for shame and blame and guilt and woe is me and I'm awful and I can't believe I screwed that situation up so bad. No, this is about, again, that with self-compassion, what did I think, feel, and what did I do? How was I consistent with my values? And be proud of those areas where you lived out your values. Honor the things that you did well, but take those 2 or 3 things that you can improve on, learn from them, and integrate them back in your life and make a resolve that tomorrow, if a similar situation occurs, you're going to handle that situation differently instead of sliding into those things that you saw on the burnout scale, the cynicism, the frustration, the discouragement, the anger, those types of things that you take what's positive, you process the negative, and then you let the negative go without the shame, without all of those other things, messy things that tend to come with it. So, just again, in summary, we've talked here in session 2, empathy is about seeking to understand. Healthy boundaries build resiliency and help prevents burnout. Self-reflection can build resiliency and help prevent burnout. But any act of self-reflection must be combined with self-compassion for it to be really effective and beneficial. And with that, we are going to, I got it done a little faster, a little bit faster than what I thought. Normally it's the opposite for me, but we got a little bit of time for Q&A, and Q&A is more to me than just like ask the expert. I would love to have a kind of a discussion, and let's kind of, feel free to reflect on the content. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm going to stop the screen share and we can just share stories and converse and talk to each other about the topic. I don't know if there are any, let me look at messages. Is there any questions in the messages?
No, not yet, but feel free to type them in the chat or take yourself off mute if you have a question for David.
It's also a time to learn from each other. Would love to hear, yeah, I went through a season of burnout and here's how I got through it. But there's learning, an opportunity to learn from each other as well.
David, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of schools have been working to get therapy assisted pets in their schools. And since you have Howie and are able to see the impact that he makes on the employees at Children's, would you mind sharing anything about the benefits of having a dog like Howie?
I
course.
would be happy to. And I don't have any, I'm going to shut my video off for a moment and I think you'll be able to see a picture. There's Howie. Howie's a 70-pound golden retriever, um, who is a trained service animal, but works as a facility dog, serving the organization. We have 3 facility dogs here at Children's. 2 of them do patient referrals. So 2 of them work with patients directly on goal-specific interventions for goals to help that patient meet goals of care. What's a little bit unique about Howie is Howie exclusively does staff support. We don't do patient referrals. Our singular role is again, the emotional well-being and mental health of our workforce. And I think it's one of, if not the best decision the organization's made in years. Howie's been on the job about 2 years now. It is absolutely incredible on so many different levels. But number one, maybe the biggest, is I now get to have conversations with people who would never give me the time of day. But they see Howie and they want to interact with Howie, and they end up having a conversation with me as a result of the interaction with Howie. So not only those new avenues for deeper conversations, Howie has this ability to get people to let down their guard and be much more honest and open and vulnerable about how they are doing, as opposed to, again, the stoic, I'm fine, I stuff it, I ignore it, I move on, I've got the armor up kind of thing. There's something about a dog, not just Howie, but a well-trained dog in that emotional support arena, who just has the ability to break down barriers and be more vulnerable and honest with ourselves.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing.
There's a couple of follow-up questions that kind of go about Howie in the chat, if you wanted to.
Yeah, how do you handle burnout? Yeah, how do you handle burnout, taking on too much when your district requires you to take on multiple buildings, 900 to 1,000 kids? That's the thing that scares me the most, is the resources, both in healthcare and in public education, is the contributing factor. It's burnout isn't a real is it very often burnout is not as much about you. It's way more about the system and the brokenness of the system, not your lack of resiliency. And I wish I had a great and immediate answer to that, but it's really that whole idea of when we're faced with a task that is beyond the resources we have available to meet the task, that's always going to be a factor and contributor for burnout. So I think advocacy, continue to help your administration see the gap in expectation and resources, and advocate for yourself and for others more of those resources. Restrictions or guidelines. Each individual school will have to set its own. The only really restriction on Howie is Howie can't go into a isolation room. So where there's an active infection, those kinds of things. Howie has to go through a grooming process once a week for infection control and meet infection control standards. And it all sounds a little bougie that he gets a spa treatment, once a week, but it has a purpose for meeting infection control guidelines and things. But I think it would be up to each district to kind of set you know, policies and standards for having a, you know, a dog, even a, you know, again, once or twice a week, to come in and round and just kind of break the monotony, for everybody. Oh, Michelle, I'm reading your comment. I love it. Yeah, set that boundary. I'm gonna take a 30-minute lunch. Yeah, that's a
I,
great example of a boundary.
I would say as a previous administrator of a school, one of the things that I noticed about the people that had the passion is that they really did feel that it was a weakness
Mhm.
if they couldn't complete the task that were being asked of them, or saying no to anything. They just didn't feel like they had that capability. And I know as an administrator, we worked really hard in my particular building to make sure that teachers and staff knew they could say no, or that they could say, can we delay that? You know, it didn't mean that they didn't have to do it, but it could mean, could we delay it? And I think that was a huge opportunity for us to kind of change the culture in the building that I was in. So that might be an opportunity for some of you, if you're feeling some of that dust, to maybe talk with your administration about, is there a possibility of just using that language? Not that I'm not going to do it, it's that, can we delay it, or can we reschedule it so that it fits better and we aren't so burned out?
Yeah.
The thought.
So process for having a dog visit the school. We have, in addition to our facility dog program, I told you we have 3 facility dogs. They're really employees of the hospital. Howie's title is Chief Morale Officer, of the hospital, but we also have a pet therapy program, and we have folks in the community who qualify their dog, as a volunteer pet therapy, and they come in one day a week and round and visit patients and do different things. And my guests are, director of volunteer services oversees that program, and I think she would be happy to share with you the policy of what are the requirements for, to get certified for like a volunteer, pet therapy program if you wanted to do something like that in your schools. And I don't want to volunteer Angela for things or put her on the spot, but Angela Lloyd is our director of volunteer, services, and would be the contact person, here at Children's for that volunteer, pet therapy program. Yeah, so Jewel, I see, I want to give you some time, to talk about, that, How Right Now, resource before we run out of time.
Yes, thank you so much, David. So, hi, everyone. I'm Jewel Schifrins. I'm the School Social Work Coordinator at Children's, and just wanted to share a couple of resources that are available to you as school employees or school partners. So the first one that I have in here, and I put the links, I was hoping to be able to share these PDF files, but I can't get the file to upload to chat. But the links that are in this that take you to the resources, I did put in the chat. So I will try to maybe email these PDFs out so that you have this information, but the links to the information included here, I did put in the chat. So this is something that the Department of Education has created for employee wellness for our school staff. So it's got some really neat resources. I can actually share, hold on, let me pull up the link to kind of share a little bit about what it looks like when you get in there. Where are we at here? Too many. Oops. Well, I can't find that page. So let me just share this other one. Oh, here it is. Okay, so it's a Google Drive. Am I sharing this yet? So it's a Google Drive that anyone can access with these resources. It's got a wellness planner, it's got activities for well-being. So a lot of those kind of categories of self-care that and taking care of yourself that David was talking about fall within this resource as well. And then the CDC, so Children's and the Department of Education and CDC partnered on their How Right Now campaign, which is also available. I think they really did kind of a push for back to school time, but all of these resources are still available and accessible for school staff. So there's resources for employees, and then there's also some social media assets and information for schools that they can share out, really just promoting the importance of taking care of yourself as a school employee, and that there are resources available through the CDC has listed some resources on there, but there's also resources available through the state, and just kind of outlines those and gives some other social media messaging. There's some different activities in here for related to self-care. Here's one about setting boundaries. So kind of aligning with what David was talking about setting boundaries for yourself in order to keep yourself healthy. There is the importance of being outside. So there's a lot of research on the significance of spending time outdoors and the impact on your mental health. So the Walk to Unlock program was one of the resources that I shared as well. They just kicked off their outdoor mental health challenge, and you can grab a team and join in and enter your information on there. And I think there are some potential prizes for winners. But just a lot of different ways to get you engaged in activities that are going to help promote your well-being. And if you are ever in need of additional resources, you are welcome to reach out to, is the Walk to Unlock. Okay, thanks, Andrea, for putting that. I think the link to the mental health outdoor challenge was up there too. But Walk to Unlock has some other resources that are not specific to the outdoor challenge. But I will put my email address in here as well. And if you ever want to reach out or need any support, I'm happy to be a resource for you. And I'm really thankful that you made time to join today and made time to take care of yourself today. And I'll turn it back over to you, Andrea, if you want to end it out.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming to this new school year of the School Health Learning Collaborative. And again, if you have questions after this, please reach out to Jewel or myself, and we can pass them on to David as well. But yeah, this year is a little bit different. So we will be emailing you with the CE code tomorrow. And then you can just put in the code as you have in former years. If you don't know how to do that, or if you haven't registered with the CE tracker, I will include instructions in the email you will get from me tomorrow. So that is all I have. Everybody have a wonderful day, and let's help each other out this year. I think that if we put some positive pressure on each other to help us create boundaries and to implement some of what we've learned today, then we're going to have an even better school year. So thanks, everybody. Bye.